Hello again, Steve here with a few comments on a coffee chat that we have upcoming on, I believe it's the 18th, or anyways, this week, the middle of January, whatever the date is, Monday evening. And the topic which was suggested is creativity. I'm not sure if we ever covered this before, but even if we have, it's a great thing to cover, I think, because, we want to be creative, we want to somehow be involved, I guess, or do what we can to improve the quality of our life experiences. So creativity certainly would have its role in there, right? And I heard it said not long ago. I ran across this guy. His name is Scott Adams. He has a lot of wise analysis of life and how things work and so on. You may know him as the creator of Dilbert, the comic strip. And he's not only just a comic strip writer. He's quite a brilliant guy as far as I can see. He's a hypnotist and author of fiction, nonfiction, a bit of a philosopher, and so on. He's got some neat ideas. And I was listening to a podcast where he was being interviewed, and he made a comment there which I knew was profound, but I didn't really understand it at first. And he basically said that, if I'm quoting this accurately, creativity is a process of removing distractions rather than something drawn upon. I better write that down. So I wrote it down. And then I started thinking about it, because I wanted to put my thoughts together as to what I could contribute to this discussion that we have upcoming on creativity. And I have for a long time had this model of how it is that we get things done in life, whether it's conscious or whether it's not conscious. I call it the continuum of advancement. It's a graph chart that shows quality of life being the vertical axis and time being the horizontal axis, and how we act within that we want to actually improve the quality of our life in time. And thus, I would say that sort of explains in a little bit of a nutshell why it is that we evolve to, over time, to become more complex and more refined, you might say, in terms of our abilities to do things. And when I started looking at these two, his comment and the way I had this broken down, there was an amazing corollary. I'll go through my analysis first. You've probably seen this before if you watched some of my videos or read my book, a couple of my books. Well, the one was called Free Your Inner Genie. I don't have a copy of it right here, but anyway, in there I show the graph chart, which is basically like a vertical axis of quality of life. We want to increase the quality of our life. We want to be more happy, more content, more joyful, and so on, rather than despaired and so on, right? And then we realize that we're continuing on this axis called time. That's the continuum. And whenever we do something, whether conscious or unconscious, there's reasons behind it if we were to analyze it. And we put our shoes on in the morning rather than walk out at -30 because we don't want to freeze our feet and so on. There's all this quality of life element built into that. But the process under which we do it is we start out with either this pain or discomfort or anticipation of pain or discomfort. Like if I'm going to walk outside in the middle of winter, my feet are not freezing now, but I know if I walk outside without my shoes on, my feet are going to be very sore. So the anticipation of that sets up the desire. The initial step that I'm going to take is the desire to put the shoes on, and depending on what kind of shoes and so on. And then there's the process, very brief in this case because it's a very simple example, but transpose that into the guy building the Eiffel Tower and you get much more complexity, right? So there's that desire, and then of course there's that mental process that goes on. We could call it visualization. Where did the dog put my shoes this time, or whatever that would be, or where did I leave them, or even just a quick look at them. They're facing this way where normally they're facing this way, and I got to get my feet around. There's a process that I go through, which is a mental process, which translates into the physical, and then I can move on. And then there's also that once there's the vision, there has to be belief that it's possible. So if somebody thinks, well, if the example was that, I would, I'm standing on the ground, but I'd much rather be sitting in a chair that's just suspended in the air, right? Well, I could desire that, I could visualize it in my mind, but unless I'm insane, I'm not going to believe that it's possible, right? So if I don't believe it, if if I don't believe that I can put my shoes on, if putting my shoes on is as inconceivable as sitting in a chair that's just suspended completely in air, not just that it looks like that because it's hanging on razor wires, but it's actually suspended in the air. If the shoes are that unbelievable, I'm not going to actually have what? The will to act, right? Because it's nonsense, unless I'm insane. So once we have the will, and that's very strong belief, and it's the strong desire and so on, then we take action, and because through action, then we create something, right? Think of simple things like building a birdhouse, right? You go through all those steps. You go through that, the not having the birdhouse and wanting to have it, you could call it a bit of a discomfort not having it, the desire to have it, and then the vision, the plans. You go get a book or whatever, you look at birdhouses and colors of birdhouses and different kinds of birds and so on and so on. And then, but you have to believe that you can actually do it. You can swing a hammer, you can get the nails, you can do this in the house, you paint and so on. And then you take the action there, and voila, there's the birdhouse. So how does this relate to what Scott Adams is talking about? Creativity is a process of removing distractions rather than something drawn upon. Well, he also wrote this book. It's something along the lines of failing to success. It's like he has this idea that everything is constantly failing, It's like business success is only a temporary thing, right? I mean, first of all, most businesses, a high percentage of them, I'm not sure what it is, high percentage of them fail within the first few years. But then everyone eventually fails. I mean, is there a business now that was going in, except maybe the Catholic Church? But most of these things, they fail after, maybe even a couple of 100 years or whatever. So they're constantly failing. But in the process, people profit off of people's efforts to keep them going, basically. So there's this constant failing, but succeeding in the process, if that makes any sense. And so if you think about it here, what's failing, right? If you start out with this level of discomfort, that is the current status quo. So the failure of that status quo is what results in the success and the processes, right? Because of the discomfort, what happens is we move into a desire phase, and a little bit of that discomfort loses. Then we move into the desire and the vision and so on. And we can relate these to other things too. Like, for example, we might say, well, Steve, how does this work in the evolutionary process? How does this, you're only talking about rational stuff. Well, no, I would say that there's more to it than that. For example, an animal that lives in a certain ecosystem gets overrun by too much competition, and it's in this valley. And a few of them they find, and it's very uncomfortable for them because they're almost starving, because they don't have quite enough food. Well, because of that, they begin to become restless, right? That pain is beginning to fail, and they're beginning to bulge out a little bit. And it's causing a hunger in them to do something else. So they have this desire to be free of that. And a few of them that are a little bit more energetic, they find a path through a pass in the mountains. And when they see this newer valley, it's like a vision begins to take shape of possibility. They might go in and just eat a little bit and then come back to what's familiar. But that desire begins to grow, and then it's just like when we begin to have a vision, it might only be a little bit. Like in building the birdhouse, you might just have ideas of a few colors. Oh, I like that bird or whatever. But then the more we dwell upon it, the more we see more details, to the point where we actually go get a book and the process begins, and we begin to build it. And the same with that evolutionary movement of those shrews that went into that first pass. They had some food in there, and then they began to work further through. Other ones began to follow them, and the vision began to take shape of a new possibility. And then when they see the valley there, the possibility, they begin to believe that it's possible. They come and they go a little bit. But as time goes by, with that belief, they have this will to move farther, because they're filling their bellies and what have you. and from that comes action, and they begin to create communities and so on in there, and they have created a new living domain for them, and they actually change as a result. They change neurologically, probably. They become more adventurous and so on, and in time the species can actually adapt. The ones that remain behind, they don't have that same creativity, and they become, subspecies of one another or whatever. So it's a kind of an example of the process of removing distractions. See, the distraction was always that we're bound by this valley. But then once somebody no longer saw that distraction, they moved into the pass. And because of moving into the pass, they saw this vision. They had this vision of greater possibility. And then when they saw that, when it began to open up, they had more and more belief. So it's the same with us when we go into a creative process. The more we move from the attention of the discomfort into the attention of the desire, the less the desire is. The more we go into the vision, the more the desire is. The more we believe, the stronger the vision, the stronger the desire, the less the discomfort. The greater the will then, right? So it all builds on each other. So this failure of the discomfort builds upon the newness of creativity, as I see it. And it's a little bit of a different way of looking at it, but it is it's such a parallel. I haven't seen yet where this theory that I have, this hypothesis of this continuum of advancement, where it fails. There may be points that I'm missing for sure, and it's probably not. It's never complete. It's always a work in progress. But I think it's a great parallel to what Scott Adams is talking about here, and that creativity is a natural aspect of it for us, and sometimes it's about getting out of the way almost, and allowing and embracing the discomfort, and allow the discomfort to fail, if you will, into these processes, and then we become absorbed eventually in the actions of directing the actions, or participating in the actions that are needed to create what it is that we want to create. Hope this is helpful. Steve here again. Great chatting. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye for now.